channel here. It'll take just a second. I'm going to shut down my YouTube, otherwise I get echo. So welcome everybody. Our agenda for today, and actually I can share that with you quickly, I believe, is to do just a couple of things with our air ionization system. So let me see if I can share this with you. Here we go. So we'll just review, I think, this. Can you see this now? So we've got 2 bids in, and one's from NAMI and one is from Johnson Controls. Alpha had some computer problems today, and so they're supposed to get us the bid tomorrow. Steve and I do have a preference already on one of the bids, along with Sherry too. Steve then can talk a little bit about just the maintenance assistance that he and his staff may be able to provide with this project. Sherry, just about the effects on the budget, just about where we're at and what this may cost. And then if the board has the members have a recommendation for the board, given that we may still have one more bid from Alpha, that's what hopefully we can accomplish in a short amount of time tonight. So any questions on the agenda?
Nope. Sounds good.
Let me see if I can. So if I can now, not quite as adept with Zoom as I am with Google Meet, apologize. I'm going to try to, can you see what I have up now, which is the NAMI quote?
No.
Nope. All right, hold on just a minute here.
I can see the quote.
You can?
Yeah.
I cannot.
Anybody else see this quote?
Oh, no, sorry. I guess it's just the agenda.
Okay, sorry. Let me stop sharing here. Here we go. Now I should be able to do it. So the NAMI quote was the first one that came in, and that was last Friday. And we won't spend too much time on this. Steve and I and Sherry will tell you our concerns about this briefly. But NAMI, again, was the first one in. And as you can see, it has got a project pricing, and you can see that attached to that on the left, excuse me, on the right, general figures for that. So when I first let the committee know that we may be somewhere around $76,000, we questioned that because below it is alternative pricing, and as you'll see, there's some information on unit ventilators. Well, for those of you that know the middle school and the old elementary school fairly well, there's individual units in all those old areas of those 2 buildings. So for example, every middle school room right now used to be 2 rooms, and so there's 2 unit ventilators in each one of those rooms. So you're looking at $2,600 for alternative pricing that's not in the project pricing up above. And as I scroll down, there are some others that we don't feel that we would need at this time because we could individually inspect those. And then they get into, again, the scope of the projects. So when you see the major project prices, those are for the large air handlers. So for example, in the middle and high school building, that's above the gym. And that's where those, like the 76, well, I take that back. Where the look at that figure, that's where that $43,000 comes in. And so in addition to that would be all these individual prices that you can see as we go through. Steve and I figured that this may be closer to $130,000 or $140,000 once you added in all of those individual units. In addition, at the end, sorry about that, they also had project notes. And at the project notes, they have got the electrical in there. We do know that we'd have a little bit more for the electrical. And Steve, I don't know if you want to describe that a little bit, but in those big air handler units, we would simply have to tie into the electrical that's there, but it would add somewhere maybe $5,000 or so, but that would be on the school district in addition to this. So the way that Sherry and Steve and I were looking at this, and we emailed back and forth. So I said, so we're all in at $76,000. And he said, oh yeah, we're all in at $76,000. But then when we started to ask more questions, it wasn't all in at $76,000. We again think it's going to be somewhere between 130 and 140 for all those individual units, and then the electrical on top of that. So questions on that so far?
Can you scroll down for just a second, Nate?
Sure.
Keep going. Okay, if you can stop.
Yeah.
What is like the very AHU1 two rows of what?
Yeah, and I think I can explain that. So this would be air handler 1, and then you can see 2 through 6 just at the high school. And so this is a series of bars and magnets that the forced air goes through, and that's the way that it's able to pick up those particles, whether it's flu, COVID, or others. And so it's another shield, let's say. It's not a filter, but it's a series of bars and magnets. And so that's where you see 2 rows of those, I think, then that's a big air handler there.
Okay, got it.
Any other questions, or I'll move on to our second bid. Bless you. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing this, and I'm going to move on to our second bid, if I can find it. Here we go. And nope. Here we go. So this one is from Johnson Controls. And the thing that we were impressed with Johnson Controls with was that, one, it was certainly more straightforward pricing on our part, which I think will be helpful as we start to work with them, so that there's not as many questions going back and forth, and we think we have one thing when we're getting another. The other part of this is that it gives the district flexibility, and again, Steve may want to talk about this when we're done, but this is the proposal at this point that we would put forward to the committee, because again, it's straightforward and it would allow us to bring the price down by doing some of the work ourselves. So it's divided into 3 segments. 1 is if they do everything, 2 if there's some shared responsibility, and then 3 if we put it all in ourselves with some training on their part. So the first scenario that you see is for $105,000, and you're going to see even what they're calling these GPS units is going to be a very similar system. In fact, Steve, you may know it might even be the same parts that the 2 different companies are ordering, and then the install is going to be a little bit different. You're muted, Steve.
All the companies can get the same material from the certain suppliers. So yeah, the GPS is one of the top systems being used now. It's considered 99.4 to 99.5% effective on killing things. So, you know, as I had it explained to me, that this is the Cadillac. It's supposed to be really good. They have other models, but they don't take out anywhere near the viruses and particles, fungus, mold, and mildew that this one does. So I really feel this is the way to go. Do the full job, don't do it halfway.
We did have one of these companies say they had another set of units that was 50% effective, but I don't think that's where any of us want to go paying, let's say, $50,000 or $60,000 for something that's half as effective as the products that we're looking at. So we're not even bringing that to you. In this situation, as you can see here, this is with Belleville doing the install. They do some training with us, and then we would do the install. The part that's worrisome for Steve and I as we talk through this is we're talking about some of those big air handler units, which you can literally walk inside, and are going to be certainly more challenging for something that we haven't done in the past. The second scenario that you'll see is in the $120,000 range. And as I mentioned earlier, this does split the responsibility between Johnson Controls and then our staff. And I know Steve might want to chime in here, but he feels certainly more comfortable with this because they could do most of the work on those big air handler units, and then those small blower units, which we think are going to be easier to install, they would train us and then help us install maybe a few, and then we can install the rest of those on our timeline. So we've got some time, you know, with some of our maintenance people, and especially if they could do some of that over the break, if we had the parts by that time, we feel much more comfortable with this. So that's about $120,000. Same equipment, it's just that some of the install is on us. And then the last scenario is if they were
Nate, real quick question. That doesn't void any of the manufacturer's warranty at all by us installing?
Not according to what they've told me so far. You know, we'll have to double check on that. In talking with them, they seemed very comfortable. He said a lot of schools have done it that way. He said the unit we put in there basically is has a magnet on it, is attached to the metal wall of the unit, and there's 2 wires to hook up.
Okay.
So it's, you know, it's not rocket scientist. It's not rocket science, but he seemed to think a lot of schools have done it that way. So he feels comfortable that we would be able to handle a lot of that.
Okay.
Could you check? That's a good question though, Trevor. Could you check on that, Steve, if we do some of the installation ourselves, that the warranty is still as it should be?
Yep. Okay.
And then again, scenario number 3 adds another $13,000 or so, and this is for their full install on this. Again, everything that you'd see below, but they're taking care of everything with the install. So, Steve, do you want to talk a little bit about, as far, you know, when you had them come through, do you feel between like Mike and Gary and yourself that you could handle some of that installation?
Yeah, especially the small units, they seem to say that it's fairly simple. And like I said, we've done minor electrical work and mechanical work around here. I think like with a little training that we should be able to handle most of those units. And, you know, if time allows, we could even probably help them with the big units, you know, dropping that 120,000, you know, a little bit lower. I guess it all depends on the weather, when they can do it, when we can do it. I mean, we can switch from painting that we're doing a lot of now and have a couple people full time on these units. So we might even be able to lower that quote from 128 down somewhat.
Did they give us any idea about delivery times for the equipment? Some of the equipment, all the equipment?
This, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but the Johnson Control bid, from what you had heard from them, we're looking at about 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, but probably 3 weeks on the parts.
Yeah, that's 3 to 4 weeks, they figured. Some of them they could get in here sooner, you know, depends on what's in stock right now. They are moving a lot of these units as of lately. So it kind of depends on what's in and what's out and what other people want. But, you know, they felt that they could get some of the smaller units in for us, that we could start working on them over Christmas break even.
And Trevor, to your question, I think Kevin too, you know, if you look at this carefully, they do say that really on those smaller units, it is a box with some wires and magnets that sets this up.
Nate, would we still have to do the additional wiring?
Do you know that, Steve, on the electrical?
Some of it, from what I understood, they would take care of the wiring in the big units. That's kind of why I would feel more comfortable with them doing it. When they looked at the big air handlers, they said, you know, there's power right there because they all have the motors in them running the fans. So it's just a matter of tapping into that box. So I feel there's not a lot of extra that would have to be done there. Some other groups, NAMI made it sound like they were going to run, you know, all new wiring up there so it sits exactly where they want it. It sounds like these units come with like a 4 to 6 foot cord on them, if I remember right. So as long as they can get a box close by, a junction box close by that they can plug it in, they're fairly comfortable. And from what I've seen up there so far, there's a lot of junction boxes on and around those units that they could tap right into, and with little or no, you know, extra work.
Are the bigger units sitting outside on the roof, or are they inside?
At the grade school, they're outside, the 3 big units outside. At the high school, they're all up here in the mechanical room. I mean, if you want to come take a look at them sometime, just let me know. I'll give you a tour. But they're all inside, and so at least they don't have the weather elements to deal with there. At the elementary school, they would have that issue to deal with a little bit.
I would think if it's something outside, we'd have to run conduit to, I mean, we're not just going to have an extension cord or something like that plugged into an outlet.
Well, there's motors up there as it is. So the conduit that runs those motors, they could just tap into that, they feel.
Okay.
You know, and it would be all inside the air handler itself. So it would be just a short amount of wiring to be done. And in some cases, they said, depending on where, you know, a box sits on a current air handler, they might just have to put an outlet in there to be able to plug into it. You know, it all depends on how it's wired and how things are done.
Okay.
How about ongoing checks on these to make sure that they're functioning? What's the maintenance look like?
There's minimal maintenance on these. As I've been told, you need to go in and wipe them off a couple times a year. But there's at the end there, Nate, I think if you scroll down, there's a module, a detector or a module of some sort. Yeah, the GPS eye detect sensor.
Yeah.
And talking to Johnson Control, they thought 2 of those would be enough, 1 for each school. And you just can walk around to different rooms, and you know, they said it's kind of like a Geiger counter is how they explained it to me. You go to a certain room, you press the button, it would tell you what the level of you know, impurities is or something like that. So you can put in stationary ones, but you know, they suggested for schools like ours, just have the portable one, and we can just periodically go from room to room and check things out. That would, you know, tell us, hey, this one's not working properly, or that one's not working properly, or they all are working properly.
There was another kind of technology that some of these vendors had talked about, which was a black light technology, and that's where you're exchanging bulbs, and there's certainly a more continued cost, and it's not more effective than the systems that we're looking at.
On a 10-year period, they figure the black light to be more than twice as expensive as the ionization. The ionization is a little bit more initial install, but then after that, your maintenance and expense is much lower than the black light.
Nate, talking budget, so we're over 50% higher than what we were initially thinking, and 120 versus 80. So what are we thinking as far as our budget?
Yeah, that's why Sherry's on here. Sherry and I, again, we've been pretty conservative this year, not knowing what was going to come up. And so I'll give you the overview, and then if you want the detail, Sherry can fill in. But any surplus that we have at this point in the budget would be taken up by the $120,000 bid. We would be back to a balanced budget. That doesn't take into account if we were to get any more CARES money in the spring, but we do know that as we bring students back, we probably are going to have to spend more on our cleaning supplies, as Steve talked about when he gave you the demonstration of the sprayers. So some of that CARES money, probably half of that, if it's $40,000 again, is going to go to probably cleaning supplies. So that's something that we're certainly concerned about. But at this point, we could pay for it. I don't know, Sherry, if you want to add more detail than that.
No, I'm just thankful that we sold the elementary school.
Right? I think we all are.
I will say this, that we're certainly not the only school that all three of these vendors have been in contact with, and they're finding it even in business settings that this kind of technology is being put into place, because they're not only talking about COVID, but a year, 2 years down the road, just knocking out flu bugs. When I did talk to New Glarus, the way that they're using it is in between their cohorts, because what they say is if you run the system for a half hour, it will take out over 99% of those air impurities, including COVID and flu. So what they're doing is they'll run it purposefully a half hour for that half hour time period in between cohorts to kind of knock that down. So I'm hoping, if we do go with a system like this, that even, a year, 2, 5 years, 7 years into the future, that we've got healthier staff, healthier students in the building, because the air is certainly much, much better with what we've got right now.
Do we have an understanding what it means to run the system for a half hour? It's not like
You want
just
to
flipping a
talk about
switch.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but anytime that you're running the heating, it's going to be on anyway. Anytime that forced air goes through there, I think the cooling as well. But what you can do, kind of like the furnace at your home, is you may not be heating, but if you're running that fan, it would still run through that system as well. Is that about right, Steve?
So like, take example, the auditorium, we don't run that air handler, that's air handler 3. We don't run that very often. So like there used to be a time in the morning from 9 to 11 where they had 2 big classes in there. We'd turn it on a little before 9. It would run the whole time they were in there, probably, or part of the time at least. And then so it would be constantly clean, the air would be clean, and it would be constantly cleaning while these students were in there. But then we could shut it off after that class period because there's nobody else in there the rest of the day. The gym is another good example. We would just run it 2 or 3 times throughout the day. And anytime the heating or cooling runs, these ionization machines are running.
Mhm. So do you have to,
As I understand, anytime the air is moving through there, these units are working.
sure, that kind of makes sense. You have to force the particles past the
Yes.
ionizers so they can be destroyed or zapped or whatever.
Yeah.
So does a person have to go around from like from unit to unit to unit to turn them on and then turn them back off?
No, when I was told is that once you wire them in, whenever the unit turns on, they'll turn on, and and off also. So that's why they wire them in the way they do, is so it runs when it needs to, and it's not running when it's not needed.
Do we have an option to run like a fan in like the smaller units? Is there a fan option where if we weren't running heat or air conditioning, would it?
Well, the air handlers, those units run no matter what, so many times a day. I can't give you the exact number. It's programmed into the system because you have to bring in fresh air anyhow every so many minutes per hour.
Okay.
So they're running, according to the program. But then depending on temperatures, heating, cooling, they'd be exchanging more than just the normal cycle.
So Nate, on the GPS eye detect P sensors, there's 7 in that bid. Are those included in that? The figures we're
Yes,
looking at?
they're included. I have to double check on that one. I don't know if those are sensors that would be just put on each unit or if it's just these, because the other one, you know, that's something I hadn't caught as of right now, but I know Johnson Control said that to get the portable sensors, and then, you know, instead of having one in every air handler that you can check, you would just walk around with this portable one and check your air that way. So, I mean, there's some fine tuning that could possibly be done here. But I believe we have 7 air handler units up here in the high school, middle school. That's probably why they have 7 of those detectors there.
I see 5 then kind of in the middle of the page. There you go.
Yep, right here.
Is that for the elementary school possibly?
Yes.
Actually, this looks like middle and high school here, Kevin, and then I think these 7 are for the unit ventilators, if I'm reading that right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because we have a couple of units like in the ceiling in the district office that have to be addressed. Coming off of the middle school air handler, there's a couple of unique situations as how they put it to me when they were looking at it. They didn't go into many details, just said it was a unique situation there. So
Kevin, you would have enjoyed us taking them down into the middle school basement, and they all kind of looked at it like they've never seen anything like that before, which, and Steve was with all of them, but they did kind of they had the same reaction of kind of scratching their head like, huh, and had to walk around to figure out what was going on down there.
Did any of them talk about the additional electricity costs? Because, you know, I'm all about the budget and how much it would add to our electric bill?
no, they didn't, but that's a question I can ask. I do know they did say this unit was much cheaper than running the black light unit. That was part of their.
Okay, but that can be relative too, though.
I know. I understand that. So I can check into that a little bit more. I'm
You know,
sure.
really, so I'm going to jump ahead. If there's less particles in the air to begin with, that means we can clean the schools faster. There's less to clean up.
Well, the air would be cleaner, but we still have surfaces that are getting dirty all the time. There shouldn't be as much dust in the air,
Right.
and particles like that, because this unit should take them out.
Right. Mhm.
I mean, we can upgrade the filters a little bit, but for the cost of it, for the increased purification to the cost, it's like 50% or 50%, double the price for the filter, about a 5 to 10% increase in filtration. So, you know, there would be a lot of money spent there for very little gain.
Yeah.
So in theory, would this help our air handler units because of the less particles and stuff going through?
Well, in theory, we could change the filters less often.
Correct. And but there again, depending on how many bugs are in the air, you know, because this will do mold, mildew, bacteria, viruses. You know, as I had explained to me, you know, these bugs will die once they pass through this ionization machine bar and then get caught up in the filter. So it's going to be, you know, if we do this, it's kind of live and learn type of deal. I had one guy tell me, actually, a dirty filter is better than a clean filter because it will trap more. He says, don't tell the filter guys that though. But it's, I just feel it's a good way for us to go if we want to, look to the future as far as cleaner air, safer air. We're still going to have the surface contact problems as far as the cleaning the school and that, but if we can keep kids in school and teachers in school because they're not sick, that's a plus.
Absolutely agree.
So how will they add stress? So I'm thinking of the high school and the fact that we just were kind of band-aiding the whole system along anyways. This won't add more stress to those, right? The whole motors and fans that we replace?
Oh, no, not the way it was explained to me. It shouldn't cause any more problems that way. Upgrading the filters would cause more stress because finer mesh in there. It would take more to push them through, the air through. So this isn't really supposed to cause any more stress. It might cause a little bit, but I wouldn't think much.
The little bit that I know about this type of a concept, so we use deionizers where I work. So we mold like plastic jars, for example, and then the jars are conveyed underneath an ionizer. So all it's doing is it's just zapping little particles of static electricity. Almost it's almost what it is, a little bit like static.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Kevin. It's pretty much just changing the particle charge.
Correct. And actually, they have used it for, like your method, Kevin, for years, but it's just been like the last 5 to 10 years, they've really got into, cleaning air and medical field, if you want to say, with the ionization process. And, they all admitted to that it's fairly new in this way of use, but it's been around for 40 or 50 years.
Why are magnets needed? Are the magnets just there to hold the ionizers to the metal?
In the VAV units, yes, I believe that's because they said instead of drilling holes and each unit could be a little bit different as how it's put together. He said they'll just, the magnets will just hold them to the wall of the unit and then we'll wire them in.
Gotcha.
Again, the last one we're waiting on is Alpha. We do have some experience with Alpha because they are one of the companies that we work with part of our computer controls of the systems that we have in the district, which are multiple controls. So we do have some experience with them. I'm not sure if the committee is comfortable with us looking at, because if it comes in like the Johnson control where we're not exactly sure what we're going to get and what we're paying for, I think we would stay with that. I'm not sure if it's something that's very similar that Steve and I get together tomorrow, because we should have it tomorrow, and say this is really, it's the same technology, lower price, same product. I'm not sure how the board members feel about if Alpha comes in at a lower price for the same product. If you're comfortable with us bringing that forward, let's say next Monday instead of the Johnson control bid.
I'm comfortable with that. If Alpha comes in with a lower bid and it looks like we're comparing apples to apples, I'm totally comfortable with that.
That too. I think, yeah, if we can save some money, that'd be great.
If we're comparing apples to oranges, that's when I'm not really sure how to answer your question.
Yeah. Steve, do you have any idea? Is Alpha gonna give us the option to do some of that install ourselves like Johnson Controls is?
That I don't know. They will be, one of their options will be this GPS system. So, as far as comparing apples to apples, that will be pretty easy that way. Like I said, I talked to Julian today, and yeah, he was hoping to have those numbers to me by noon tomorrow. But yeah, I think the big thing would be the cost of the labor as far as installing that.
Trevor, any thoughts on that? Otherwise, depending on what comes in tomorrow, we'd be bringing the Johnson Control bid on Monday for a vote.
No, I'm okay with that. I would think that approach is acceptable.
I like the fact that they're allowing us to chip in and help reduce some of our costs. So that's attractive to me.
And it helps them also because as busy as they are, if they can only have to spend a week here instead of 2, you know, that's a big plus for them. So, and like I said, if we can jump in and help with some of the big ones also, you know, it'll be, everything will help.
I was actually thinking, Kevin, that if we're doing some of the installation, I would guess that that whether it's Steve or Gary or Mike, might be better adept than in the future. You know, if any problems do arise, that they have a comfort level with what that system should look like, whether it's cleaning them or, you know, if they're not working properly, to go in and look at how they're set up.
The thing I struggle with always with something like this is you can do a time and materials type of a bid, which is much cleaner for us, so we know exactly how much time they spend with the install, for example. So if they're saying, you know, we would help with the install, well, you know, what does that mean? They do one and we do everything else, or do they do 5 of them and we do everything else? I mean, that's something that Steve, you'll have to just, you know, be on top of, because we can't allow them just to plop it on the roof, for example, or whatever the case might be, and walk away and leave you stranded.
Well, no, that would be something they would have to do. The big units, it's the small in-room units that they would allow us to do, because they said that's where it's simple. It's the big units are a little more complicated, and that would be something that we would leave to them.
Okay.
That's why I don't like the first scenario, that we do everything with just a little bit of training. I think with with those big units are moving a lot of air, covering a lot of space in these buildings. We better get them done and done right. And the smaller units, you know, it's not as critical. I mean, it's still critical, but they said they would come back after we finished up doing it and check them all to make sure they were done right and working properly. So, you know, I feel fairly comfortable with working with them that way.
Okay, good.
They're not going to leave us hanging as far as we don't know if these units are working or not. They said they would check it out.
If you go back to scenario 1, where I've got the cursor here, they do have this checkout time. That's with us doing everything and the training. And then scenario 2, again, to your point, Kevin, they are installing the large air handler units. We would just be doing those smaller room units as well. So, and again, they'd guide us through that process.
Yeah, it sounds fairly straightforward.
Just want to make sure we're getting our $15,000 worth, right? You know, I mean,
Right. Yeah.
And like I said, if we can do more as far as helping them, we might be able to lower that 120 down even more. If one guy can just help them install the big ones, because it sounds like they come in units, a foot to 2 feet long. And as they explained it to me, it's kind of like snapping Legos together, only a little more sophisticated. So if one person could help them and a couple of other people are installing them in the individual room units, I mean, we can, whatever we do, it's going to help.
I would suggest too that we, you know, any resources that we can repurpose to this project, I would do that. I think, you know, painting can always happen, and just repurpose their time to this project.
Right. And that's what we're looking at. If we go ahead and do this, is where we move people, you know, to what positions, what they feel comfortable doing. We might have 4 or 5 of us working on that. All depends on what everybody feels comfortable with and what they need help with.
My only question, I guess, comes back up to kind of to like Kevin's point too, with time and materials. If this is their bid and we end up, putting, 40, 45 hours of labor of our resources into it, I just wanted, how do we ensure that the price is reduced accordingly?
Well, I guess that would be something I'd have to talk to them about.
Yeah.
I feel fairly comfortable with the Johnson Control. They actually stopped in August, when a lot of schools were looking into doing this. They were very good at just explaining it. And they said, if you have interest, call me back. And I called them back and they were here within about 24 hours, one of them lives in Verona and the other one lives in Monticello. So there are people that are nearby that I feel pretty comfortable talking with and working with.
Well, that's good to hear.
It's, it's kind of a matter of, you don't know what you get till you open up the box of candy, right? So we'll try to do the best we can, and I'll talk to them a little bit more about possibly lowering the bid if we can help some more. It all depends on what they feel we can do without getting in their way.
Yeah.
On the big units.
Yeah.
I was just taking a few notes. So Steve, you're going to ask about Johnson Control about the warranty if we're doing the install. And I guess I'm going to guess that if they're doing the final checkout on any of those units anyway, that would still be good, but we better check on that and then see if we can get a clear bid from Johnson Controls with our added labor.
Yep. And I'll check into the electrical cost. And I guess any other questions anybody has, we'll try to check into and see what happens there. And so
sounds good.
Anything else, Ryan, Trevor?
I'm all good. It's too bad it's so much more expensive than we were hoping, but
Yeah,
that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that was, if we had a building where everything was connected with just your main air handlers, that would have been the price. But because we've really got, almost like two buildings within one at the elementary from the old and the new, and then same thing with the middle school added on, or the high school added on to the middle school, we really got multiple systems, which makes it more complicated.
That added about 40 to 50,000 just having to do all those individual rooms, where one or two more air handlers would have been 5 or 10,000. So it's just the cards we were dealt with the way the building was built. And New Glarus, I believe they said they only have 3 or 4 air handlers in that high school building. So they got away from doing this fairly cheap because of that.
Steve, do you know, did they use Johnson Controls as well?
Yes, they did.
Okay, that's good.
So, Johnson Control gave me the name of 3 different schools they've done, and New Glarus is the one, and I can't remember the other 2 right offhand, but they were in the area. They were, I think, one in Madison, and I think they did some work in Verona also, but Verona or Oregon. So they could get me a list of people if you wanted to call some other school districts or something like that.
No, not for me. You don't have to do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're busy enough. Jeez.
All right, well, if there's no other questions, we'll have that in. Steve and I will still touch base tomorrow on Alpha's bid, but then we'll have something on the agenda for Monday. Right now it'd be Johnson Controls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and I feel pretty comfortable if Alpha comes in that we could help them too. I know some issues that we've had in the last, since I've started, where we've been able to jump in and help. We've been able to at least cut a lot of dollar signs down just by man hours it took them to do something by having a second person helping do it. Just little things like helping get filters and belts and stuff up under the roof. It went from a 2.5 day job to a 5-hour job because we were able to help them. So, and at $100 and some an hour, that starts to add up. So
Right.
I feel they would let us help, but I don't know what their bid otherwise would be.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Thanks for all your work.
Yep. Thanks for your time tonight, everybody. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Have a good
Hey,
evening.
Trevor, before you
Yeah.
leave, the
Yeah.
auditor sends you an email. They need you to respond so they can finish the audit.
Oh, I just saw that too. I started replying. I got about halfway through it.
Okay,
All right. So I'll get that completed.
Great,
I'll
thank
check
you.
on it as well.
Yep.
okay.
All right. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah,
You too.